this morning, or was it the case that Celtic fans slept a lot better last night that we now have a new goalkeeper? Tell us in the comment section before we dive right into this crazy news that came out last night. The crazy news that came out last night probably made some Celtic fans sleep a lot better. The fact that we now have a goalkeeper. We've been crying out for a goalkeeper, let's face it. The thought of going to America with Scott Bain and Benji Siegrist in goals was putting the fear of God into most Celtic fans, putting absolute fear of God into most Celtic fans. But before we jump into the Celtic transfer news this morning, and there is a lot to get around. It is an unbelievable turn of events last night. We'll talk about that in just a minute, but jump into the comment section first of all to see who's all here this glorious morning. This glorious morning. It's a bit cloudy. It looks like Scottish weather outside. Anyway, Evan Sean, morning, Baz from sunny Glasgow. Brendan knows what he wants. Kasper will do. He gets his man. Kasper's has bags of experience. People worry about his age. They wanted Joe to sign another year. This is true. Morning, Baz and everyone. It says J1888 in Celtic Family. I really hope that we get Kasper. It's a done deal, mate. Kasper's the done deal. It's a done deal, and he will be on the flight to the good old USA at the beginning of the week. Hail, Baz. If it's true, then I'm happy. Kasper Schmeichel can do a great job for us. His experience in big games is invaluable. Yep, Port Job Express kind of get excited for Brendan leaving in 2 years. If Kasper takes up the second year, he'll be leaving at the same time, and we're back to square one. No manager and no goalkeeper. Lazy scouting from Celtic. It's only a stopgap unless we sign a younger goalkeeper in this window. That is said Port Chops Express. Paul's in this morning. He says, hail, the Celtic women and men around the world. Lorna Gallagher. Morning to you, Lorna. How are you this morning? She says, happy with Kaiser, quality keeper with an abundance of experience. Yep, that's what I'm thinking. Lark Winder Pal says Celtic paying big wages for Kasper the Ghost. Lol. Linked for the goalkeeper for 8 million under 30, and we get a 38-year-old freebie. You can see how this is going to go. More important, Job Express. I get what you're saying, but Kaiser is a good goalkeeper. Frustrating that all the money in the bank. We can't get a younger goalkeeper, but I'm happy enough with that. Says Lola, and then there's lots of other people jumped on the live already. Right. Obviously, we'll get to the big news in just a minute, but there's an interesting article talking about Celtic. It's Chris Sutton's article this morning. Daniel Kelly's not an isolated Celtic incident, but I don't buy one fan argument about the transfer pattern, and it's something that we've all spoke about. Chris Sutton goes on to say, if you look at Spain, if they're good enough, you play them. If you're good enough and you're old enough, is one of the most famous sayings by Sir Matt Busby, and it's still on the wall at Old Trafford down in Manchester. You only have to look at Spain in the Euros, playing a 16-year-old player, absolutely fantastic player. But you have to think, Celtic can only do so much. The 18-year-old Daniel Kelly won't be part of pre-season after failing to sign a lucrative deal. The club he could be away by the end of January for free. It's not an isolated news. It might have been met with a shrug of shoulders, but he's a young lad who's just had a handful of experiences and he's got itchy feet, Chris Sutton says, so it's fair enough. It's not an isolated incident at Celtic. Seems to be a pattern of Parkhead prospects jumping ship before they've even made a name for themselves. And then he goes on to talk about Jim McLean back in the 80s. Now, for us that are old enough to remember Jim McLean when he ran Dundee United back in the 80s, he would sign up all his youth players on 10-year contracts because and the thing is he had a Dundee United team that were quite successful. He had a Dundee United team that beat Barcelona. They did beat Barcelona back then with youth players. So it's always been an issue in Scotland. I'm not going to get too hung up about it. Chris Sutton does go on to talk about a couple of other younger players that left Celtic. They went away to Bayern Munich, thinking that we're going to be great stars of the German league, but they ended it. One got loaned out to Queen's Park, and look what's just happened to him. The two of them that went to Bayern Munich are now being released by Bayern Munich. When you look at Ben Doak, people will say Ben Doak had a couple of good games, and then that was it. When you look at Rocco Vata was given the opportunity to be third choice striker, and let's face it, that's probably the reason that Celtic went out and got Adam Ida. They probably started the season, and you have to think about what Brendan Rodgers was thinking about at the start of the season. Saying, look, we've got O there. O might not be the answer. And he threw down the gauntlet to young Rocco Vata, saying, look, you sign this contract, you're going to be third choice striker in the first team. If Rocco Vata had proved to be the type of player that we thought he was going to be, or had the potential to be, do you think that Celtic would have went out and got Adam Ida? I don't think so. I don't think so. I think that Celtic wouldn't have went and spent the money on Adam Ida. They would have nourished Rocco Vata and brought him on during the season. And we all know what happened last season. Rocco Vata was nowhere to be found. Now, the fact that Daniel Kelly um, has decided to go down the same route, that's up to him. That's up to him as a player. Chris Sutton does go on to say, he said, look, there's a lot of players that haven't made it at Celtic, but when you look at Kieran Tierney came into the team and he knocked out an international player in Emilio Izaguirre. He knocked him out of the team and he kept Emilio Izaguirre out of the team. He said that's what young players need to do. He says Kieran Tierney went on to make 150 appearances and then he got his big money move to Arsenal. He says that's the ideal career path for me. If Parkhead is the preferred place of development, um, because let's face it, Celtic are a development club. And I think what we're seeing now with all the changes that went on in the background with Celtic over the last couple of months. Brendan Rodgers is putting in people in place that he knows that will get the best out of the young players. Bringing in the likes of Johnny Hayes, um, it should give an, a pathway to the first team, and it's one of the legacies that I think that Brendan Rodgers will leave at Celtic. The fact that in 2 years' time we might have a bit more young players coming through. Anyway, that's not the big news. That is not the big news. Last night broke the big news that it's only a matter of time before O leaves Celtic and goes to Genk. It looks like that transfer is ramping up, which means the move for Adam Ida must just be days away. Celtic will be getting their man, and O will be disappearing out the ether, out of Celtic, and going over to Belgium by the looks of it. And then later on, the one and only Fabrizio Romano broke the news late last night that Celtic had a deal for Kasper Schmeichel. Yes, Kasper Schmeichel could arrive at Celtic this weekend. A medical is booked. The medical is booked for this weekend. He's just been to the Euros. Now, I'm going to tell you why I think this is a good piece of business for Celtic right now. Last season, we were wanting the one and only Joe Hart to stay that little bit longer. We all know that goalkeepers, when they get to the age around 37, actually tend to improve as goalkeepers. There was a certain Italian goalkeeper that who was still playing top level football at 40-year-old. So, Kasper Schmeichel to Celtic. Is it a good deal? Yes or no? Tell me in the comments. Just say yes or no in the comments. Is it a good deal for Celtic? I think so, yes. Because one, get an international goalkeeper. He's not going to be dropped from the international team anytime soon. Kasper Schmeichel brings a wealth of experience in the Champions League and at top level football, a bit like what Joe Hart did. He'll give Callum McGregor a helping hand when that experience side of it. Going into the Champions League, it's seen as a safe pair of hands by the manager. It's somebody that he knows and trusts. And people will say, yeah, it's only a 1 year deal with the option of a second year. Does it mean that Celtic did not get the player that they wanted? And Brendan Rodgers knew Kasper, and he's picked up the phone to Kasper Schmeichel and he said, "Look, 10 games in the Champions League, Kasper. 10 games at this stage of your career. Do you think that you can walk into another team 10 games in the Champions League and the potential to win three more trophies?" 3 more trophies at the end of your career. We all know when it gets to the end of the career, people start looking back on their career and looking at missed opportunities. People look back and they look at missed opportunities. And Scott Brown spoke about it many a time, about many a player that left Celtic and then they picked up the phone to Scott and said, I regret leaving Celtic. When I see the medals that Scott Brown went on to win as a Celtic captain, and as a Celtic player, it's understandable why Kasper Schmeichel would want to come to Celtic for starters. It's understandable because he has those guaranteed games in the Champions League, and he also has the chance of winning three trophies. And Brendan Rodgers gets in a player that it knows and trusts. It's okay saying, "Yeah, let's go and spend 8 million on a goalkeeper that Brendan Rodgers has never worked with before. Let's spend 8 million on a goalkeeper that's a little bit younger." That gives you no guarantee whatsoever. Now, bringing in Kasper Schmeichel gives us no guarantee, but the manager knows what he's getting with Kasper Schmeichel. The manager, and there's a lot to be said about working with someone that you know what you're going to get from them and how hard they're going to work and what they're going to put into it and what they're going to give back to then going to get a player for £8 million and not sure what you're going to get. We did that with the Barkas. We did that with Barkas. We spent 4.5 million because he played for some fantastic football against Celtic for starters, and on paper, and he looked a decent goalkeeper. It doesn't always work out, and maybe Brendan Rodgers is thinking my legacy is if I don't do well in Europe this year, the fans are going to be calling for blood. I need to bring in someone that I know that I can trust, that knows their way around Europe, knows about playing top level European football. Kasper Schmeichel has done that. So for me, Kasper Schmeichel bringing in that wealth of experience is a good thing. But Celtic have got a massive decision to make over the next couple of days before we go to America. Because we need to get rid of Benji Siegrist. We need to get rid of Benji Siegrist. And then we need to, for me, we need to promote one of the younger lads. We need to promote one of the younger lads to third choice goalkeeper at Celtic, whether it be young Toby or whether it be young Josh Clark. Two of them are fantastic goalkeepers in the making. They have to be brought into the first team and brought in and around working with the first team on a weekly basis so that they could be the keeper. They could be. We could have a number one keeper from within. It's been done before. Done with David Marshall. Done with David Marshall. Look how well David Marshall went on to be. Celtic probably got rid of David Marshall too quick. And I think that the way that we should be going is bringing an experienced goalkeeper. You know, even if we get him for the 2 years, if we get him for 1 year, it's fair enough. I think if we win the league again and we go into the Champions League, I think that will probably be the determined factor whether Kasper Schmeichel stays at Celtic for that second year. And I think that Brendan Rodgers doesn't want to put his reputation on the line when it comes to Europe. It's as simple as that. It's a massive, massive opportunity that Celtic have this year in Europe. You know, we've got more games in Europe. We need to win 3 games in Europe to get our coefficient way better. Because as it stands just now, Rangers are 29th in the coefficient league in Europe. Celtic are 69. Is that acceptable? No, it's not. Um, we've won so much domestically over the last 20 years, but when it comes to Europe, they're sitting laughing at us. That new club from across the city is sitting laughing at us because they're sitting 29th in Europe because they've had a good run in the Europa. Now, Celtic only need 3 wins to get them jumping right up that coefficient league. 3 wins in Europe is something that has evaded Celtic for a long time. Brendan Rodgers has had to sit and think about the goalkeeping situation to make sure that he brings in a goalkeeper that can talk to his back line. Now, there's another reason that I think that Kasper Schmeichel to Celtic has been a fantastic deal. One is the one and only Matt O'Reilly. Matt O'Reilly wants to be an international player. What better to have him playing with the international goalkeeper of his country? For me, it's an absolutely fantastic reason that Matt O'Reilly will stay at Celtic, even if there is a big bid of 25 million comes in. I think it's one of those situations where Matt O'Reilly is going to go, you know what, I've got a chance to work with the international goalkeeper on a weekly basis and see him in action and talk to him. And then, you know, speaking to the international goalkeeper, it's going to go back to the international manager because let's face it, the international manager isn't going to come and watch Matt O'Reilly on a week to week basis in Scottish football. Not a chance. And that was the reason that he didn't get into the top, the chance to go into the Euros. He didn't get picked to go into the team. He's had 2 international appearances so far, Matt O'Reilly. I think it's a perfect opportunity to keep Matt O'Reilly next season and saying, look, Matt, this is what we are building. this is what we're building. This is the caliber of keeper that we've brought in. We want to build the midfield around you and Rio. And this is what we want to do. All we need to do now is get the Paulo Bernardo deal done and the Adam Ida deal done. But is that going to be enough? No, it's not. We still need a left back at Celtic, and we still need to determine whether we buy in another keeper or we promote the younger keeper into the first team. Anyway, let's dive back into the comment section and see what you lovely people are saying. We're desperate for top class centre back to play week in, week out. With Cameron Farter Vickers, not much progress on that, says Boy for Bennett Offer. Medical today, allegedly. Kasper, our friend goalie, in already. Yep, he's in Glasgow already. Even better. Domestic isn't the bar, Europe is. Brown Warrior, exactly. Domestic is no longer the bar. Brendan Rodgers knows that he can win the league in Scotland. He knows he can win trebles in Scotland. That is undisputed. His legacy has to be making Celtic better in Europe. And I think that's the whole reason that he's went for the one and only Kasper Schmeichel. Brendan Rodgers' European record is rubbish, says Paul Baird. Paul Baird, who still thinks that Brendan Rodgers should be kicked out of Celtic. Well, he's not going to be going anywhere soon because he's got his. Brendan Rodgers was asked about Kasper Schmeichel last week when he was asked about goalkeepers, and he did play a lot of compliments to Kasper Schmeichel, and I think at that point Denmark were still in the Euros when he was asked. When you get a caliber of goalkeeper in like that, I mean, I don't even know how many caps he's had for his country, um, but it's on par with Joe Hart. It's on par with Joe Hart. None of us complained when Joe Hart came in. We paid 1 million or something for Joe Hart. It was absolute peanuts. Joe Hart took a massive pay cut to come to Celtic. Nobody was complaining about it then. And I think that Celtic fans complaining about getting in another established goalkeeper at Celtic. If you would sit 5 years ago, 3 years ago, when Kasper Schmeichel was probably at his peak, you would never have said, we're going to get Kasper Schmeichel playing at Celtic. Never. This is a Brendan Rodgers. He's got 105 caps. 105 caps. Well, there you go. He's got more caps than the keeper that just left. If he doesn't sign, it'll not be announced until Monday. London Stock Exchange will be told first. Yep, it will be. But they can still announce it and then announce it to the stock exchange. Need two keepers playing. And simple, says Stephen Kennedy. William says, where is Benji Siegrist? What happened to the top class goalkeeper we signed? Put him out on loan if we can't sell him. Spot on Baz Casper will do well. William, it's the fact that Benji Siegrist wants out of Celtic. Benji Siegrist said after the Scottish Cup final, you've got to remember, Benji Siegrist was actually in the squad for the Scottish Cup final. Everybody thought it was going to be a swan song. Benji Siegrist did say that that's him. He's done it at Celtic. He was all over social media. Well, his missus was. He was very clever about it. He was very clever about it, and not to be seen as him saying on social media that he was leaving Celtic. His missus said on social media in public that he had agreed a deal to leave Celtic for nada, for nothing, and they were going to enjoy their new life, another club in Europe, European football, because his missus can do her podcast from anywhere in the world. Benji Siegrist isn't happy at Celtic. Get him out the door. He's never managed to push Scott Bain for second. He should have been pushing Scott Bain for second all day long, and he should have been the number two goalkeeper. He's not. So get rid of him, as far as I'm concerned. Sevco in Europe over the past 5 years have been way better than ours, despite playing second fiddle in Scotland. The approach in Europe is more important than the quality you have available. They have proven this. Exactly, Brown Warrior. This is why I think that Brendan Rodgers has went down the whole Kasper Schmeichel to Celtic route, because it gives us that stability that we've had, especially with Joe Hart. People will look up to a goalkeeper that's playing international football. People will look up, younger players will look up to a goalkeeper that has just played at Euro 2024. People will look up to a goalkeeper that's done 105 caps. Anyway, chill pill, because of the interest the 100 million makes. Let me see. He'll be a good character to replace Joe Hart in the dressing room. I think so. Stephen Pointer says, I'll take him all day long. Brown Warrior says, they made a major final with a bang average Hun team. They did that. What on earth are our board keeping the money sitting in the bank for? Said chill pill. Maybe Celtic are going to go out and do a £20 million player. You never know. Maybe they're going to go out and get a £20 million player. Look, when it comes to, it doesn't matter how much Celtic have got in the bank. Some players just will not want to come and play in Scotland. It's as simple as that. Some players will not see going to play Dundee and Dundee United on a Wednesday night in December as a fantastic prospect. They will not see that long journey up through the Highlands to Ross County as something to be looked, you know, Kilmarnock away. It's highly the highlight of someone's season. So you have to look at, and I think that the carrot of the Champions League has been. I mean, if you'd said Kasper Schmeichel would never have came to Celtic if Brendan Rodgers wasn't there. Not a chance. Not a chance. Um, is he the answer, Baz? Is Kasper Schmeichel the answer? Short term, yes. If we bring in another goalkeeper that is going to battle it out for number two, then you never know. If if Celtic do the right thing and get rid of Benji Siegrist and promote either Josh Clark or young Toby, and I think it'll be young Toby, if they promote them to third choice goalkeeper, so that they're in and around the first team on a weekly basis, that gives you 2 years to get a goalkeeper from the B team up to first team standard and training with an international goalkeeper on a weekly basis. So for me, it makes sense that way. Is it the way that Celtic are going to go in the future? And this gives you this maybe gives you an insight into the way that Celtic are going to go in the future. I think Brendan Rodgers has got the Celtic board, and the Celtic board are probably sitting with the reality of, every time we buy in a player for 2 million, £3 million, it doesn't always work. How about we start getting our academy players up to £2 or £3 million standards, and then you can sell them on at 2 or 3 million. If they're not, if by the time that they're 22, if they're not going to make it at Celtic, you've got a £2 or £3 million player on your hand, and you can sell them on for 2 or 3 million. You might get the odd one that'll break through that's in the 25 million bracket, like Kieran Tierney. Daniel Kelly, if he'd stayed at Celtic for another couple of years, played first team football at Celtic, you know, nudged Rio Hatate out the first team. And I think it'd be Rio Hatate that he would have nudged out the front team. Because let's face it, Rio Hatate doesn't show up sometimes. And there's lots of times where you're just thinking that Rio Hatate's mind's elsewhere. Daniel Kelly had that opportunity. But instead, looking back to what Chris Sutton said in his article this morning, younger players are offered 10 grand a week just coming out of B team. 10 grand a week. They're offered a house for their family down where and it's like they're given all this gift wrapped bullshit, and it's hard to compete with that. Celtic can't compete with that, but it doesn't always work out. It doesn't always work out. Yeah, they've got maybe a 200 grand house that they're given rent free for a couple of years. They're not given the house to keep. The club retains that house. The club retains the property. They're given a 200 or 300 grand house to live in whilst they're down there. But it doesn't always work out. Celtic need to do something, and I think the way forward for Celtic is stop buying in these prospect signings that we're going to try and sell on for 10, 15 million. Okay, there's ones like Matt O'Reilly where you see the opportunity and you know that there's a fantastic player in there, and you see the pathway that he might take. You take opportunities like that. But bringing your own youth through and selling them on is far more lucrative to Celtic on an ongoing basis. You could sell 3 or 4 players for 2 or 3 million every year that are never going to make it into the team. And then you can maybe every now and again you could sell one for 25 million. Anyway, we don't know what's going on behind the back doors of Celtic because they're not going to really tell us that much. Let's jump back into the comments section. Don't think Bernardo or Ida have what? Personally, I think that as a panic buy, surely there's a younger keeper we could have brought in. And a wee bit of optimism, says Paul C. We've done that before, Paul, and I think you've got to remember Brendan Rodgers will be looked at this year on European results. If Brendan Rodgers goes in and brings in a younger keeper for 5, 6, 7, 8 million, and he's an absolute howler in Europe, right? Has an absolute howler in Europe. People start getting the knives out for Brendan Rodgers. I can't do it in Europe. Can't do it in Europe. He's shite in Europe. We've got an opportunity this year in the Champions League, and Brendan Rodgers has had a hard call to make. And maybe it's the fact that certain keepers didn't want to come to Celtic. Maybe it's the fact that Brendan Rodgers thought, I'm not sure about the mentality of this guy. Can this guy, when the going's hard, and you've got to remember, not every player can cope with 60,000 fans, 55,000 fans, or whatever, paying for blood because we drew a game of football in Europe, or if we lose a game in Europe. You know, most keepers and most players that will come to Celtic will go, we've just been beaten by a better team. That's not acceptable at Celtic. And you have to bring in a player that knows that mindset, that knows what's at stake. Kasper Schmeichel ticks all the boxes. Let's face it. Kasper Schmeichel ticks all the boxes when it comes to Brendan Rodgers being able to, he knows the player inside out. He trusts the player and he knows what he's going to get from the player. Bringing in an £8 million keeper, you're not sure about the mindset. You know, you don't know exactly what you're going to get on a day-to-day basis. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, three helps through. The board have less they spend. The more the board had, the less they spend. That could be true. Brownwater says, I would love to see Big Joe back at Celtic as Stevie Wood's replacement. I think he would retire. And I don't think Stevie Woods is anywhere near retirement age just yet. I don't think he's anywhere near retirement age. Casper is potentially a clever signing if it convinces Matt O'Reilly to stay, says Big Dom. That is my point exactly. There's no better reason for Matt O'Reilly to stay because he knows that if he wants any information going back to the national team manager about how he trains on a weekly basis, the international manager does not see enough of Matt O'Reilly. He didn't see enough of Matt O'Reilly to warrant him. He didn't see enough of him in the Champions League. He's just a young player. He's only had 2 international caps. It's his first season in the Champions League. He's not really ready for international football. Kasper Schmeichel is in the first team of Denmark, and Matt O'Reilly has a fantastic season with Celtic. He gets into the national team. Bob's your uncle, easy as you go, and it's all happy days as far as we're concerned. But Celtic do need to bring in someone else in that midfield, as far as I'm concerned. They do need to bring in someone else in midfield. They do need to get in Adam Ida. Is Adam Ida the ultimate go-to answer for the Champions League? But we won't know that until we get into the Champions League. He will give us something completely different from Kyogo. He's definitely better than O. He's definitely better than O. And we need to get a defender and a left back in. That's what we really need to get in now is is a defender and a left back. Let's jump into some of the comments. Jasper signing won't make a scrap of difference to Matt O'Reilly, says Chilpill. Morning Bad, says Gordon. Richard Smith, Casper is good. Shot stopper, but we still need another goalie. We still need another goalie. If the young players don't want to sign, then get them out the door. Younger, if they're not good enough, let them learn. Yep. I think if he doesn't, I mean, Brendan Rodgers is of the opinion. Look, we've got until December to try and sort this out. If he's not going to sign at this point, and Celtic have said, look, this is the maximum contract that we're going to offer you. For me, I would sell young Daniel Kelly just now. Do not leave it in his hands so he gets the opportunity to go to the team that he wants to. You know, we put him, I mean, he could still turn around and say no to any team that we try and sell him to. It could be in his hands that way. But for me, I would get him right out the door. Your points are totally valid, mate. As we were saying, bringing a youth keeper to get him to the standard. Could it be done with heart? It's a hard one. If you bring in the youth, I'm all look. It was done with David Marshall. David Marshall came through the setup. He knew he wasn't first choice goalkeeper, and then once he was, he sort of grabbed that. Grabbed it by the gloves, as they said. Anyway, instead of projects, Pork Chops Express says, we've tried a model that we use to stick to. Surely we can take 2 or 3 years and improve for players instead of looking to buy huge profit every window, every 3 years, buy experience. Yeah, I totally get that, Pork Chops. But I think that's the way that Brendan wants. Brendan wants to nourish our own prospect players. There's no use having a B team if they're not going to get through into that first team. Look at teams like Mulder. Look at like a lot of the Scandinavian teams. They bring in young players and then they sell them on. If they're not good enough, they sell them on. You know, it happens all the time. Bring in the young players, make the young players better. And if you're getting 3 million for them at the age of 21, it's 3 million better than getting at the age of 18, getting 347,000. You know, it's as simple as that. Sell them to another SPFL club for 2 million. You know, it's sell them to an English EFL, English second division team for 2 million. You know, it's getting more money than getting, and this is why I think that Celtic have maybe changed what's going on in the background that they haven't spoke about. I mean, Celtic finally put out information about all the changes that have happened, confirming what we already knew. But anyway, it's good news today. It's a good news Celtic day. We have a goalkeeper, so let's be happy that we do have a goalkeeper. Good morning, Baz says Lanky. Lanky, you're about half an hour too late, mate. it's, something today says I'm okay with cheap players or free. At least we can freshen up Parkhead, pay the bills, and we have some brilliant sub £5 million players over the last few years. Brendan Rodgers on 3 million a year plus bonuses if he wins the title. So of course he's a yes man. Brown Warrior says, has O made a bigger impact in Celtic than Tony Watt? Not a chance. Not a chance. Tony Watt made more impact at Celtic than O could ever make. O has not got it in him to be a Tony Watt. He's not got the pace. He's not got the pace of Tony Watt, and that's a cracking um, that's a cracking way to look at it. Is O any better than Tony Watt? No, I would say no. Tony Watt came through the system. Tony Watt scored that absolutely cracker of a goal on the break against Barcelona. Is can O do that? Not at all. O's not got that speed. O's not got that speed. There's a 16-year-old in Yamal playing in Spain for fuck's sake. If you're good enough, you should play. Yeah, but the thing is Yamal has signed a fantastic contract with Barcelona, and that's why Barcelona are playing him. Daniel Kelly doesn't want to sign the Celtic contract. Why should we play him? Why should you play an 18-year-old player that doesn't want to commit his future to the club? When you've got guys that are sitting on the bench that are saying, I want to play for Celtic. This bullshit that, oh, I'm at my childhood club. I'm at my fucking, do you know what? You've been there since you're 8 year old. First opportunity and you're fucking off. Piss off. Give me that shit. You're thinking about cash and you're thinking about short termism. Where if Daniel Kelly had knuckled down, signed the contract, gets into this first team, and I believe that Daniel Kelly could be the player to knock Rio Hitati out the team. I think he is. I think Daniel Kelly has that prospect in him to knock Rio Hitati out of the team and be a better player than Rio Hitati. You might say I'm absolutely crazy for thinking it, but I think he's got it in him. And sometimes you get a young guy with that little bit of passion to prove that he's better, aka Kieran Tierney, when he did it to Emilio Ezagiri. He knocked Ezagiri out of the team and he kept Ezagiri out of the team. Anyway, Oh, it's got to go, Baz, says Bread. Yamal is 16. Yes, he is. That is even younger, but he's signed a lengthy contract with Barcelona, and Barcelona are going down that. Look, the whole of Spanish football is going down the route of youth. You know, the national team who will win. The national team will win on Sunday. Mark my words for it, because they play football, and I don't think England have came up against a team that really plays decent football and can defend as a team. Anyway, the money for O could go straight to Adam Eder Fund. Yep, Big Dom says I'd like to see Celtic look like a European team this season, rather than we've looked embarrassing so far for too long. Bye bye, Kelly. See you. Lol. The shirt don't shrink to fit the player, even though he's a big player. Yamal is 17 today, says Paul Baird. Kelly wants 20 grand a week. Fucking 20 grand a week. Well, there you go. That just says it all. If he wants 20 grand a week, let him go. Sell him just now. Sell Daniel Kelly just now. And I think it's a shame because he could have went on to be an absolute Daniel Kelly. If he stayed at Celtic, right? If he wants 20 grand a week just now, he should be thinking, I'm going to look at what Matt O'Reilly did. Matt O'Reilly was at Fulham. He turned down a contract at Fulham and he was without a team. He was training on a pitch in a public park because he knew that if he put his mind to it, he could get way more than what he was going to get at Fulham. Right? He went to MK Dons to get back into football, knowing that he had a clause in the contract to sell him for 1.5 million if a top team came in for him. And it worked. Celtic came in for him, took him for 1.5 million. Celtic then turned down 18 million for Matt O'Reilly. Now, Celtic 10 years ago would have bit the hand off them, would have absolutely bit the hand off of Atletico Madrid and sold them. And they would have been like, that's 17 million, that's 16 million profit straight away. But they didn't. And Matt O'Reilly didn't want to go. If Matt O'Reilly was really wanting to go to a top team in Europe, he could have turned around in December and said, no, I want to go. I want to go. And Celtic would have had no choice. He would have had no choice whatsoever. Daniel Kelly should have looked at the longer term. If he does really well for Celtic for 2 years, he can then be sold, like Kieran Tierney. And you're not telling me that when Kieran Tierney left Celtic to go to Arsenal, we went for 20 grand a week. Did he heck? Did he heck? He went for even more money than that. And that's where Daniel Kelly is letting himself down. And anyway, he spat the dummy out, piss off. Maybe Kelly should talk to Matt. Exactly. If I was Celtic, I would be getting Matt O'Reilly and Daniel Kelly in a room and just talking to him. Anyway, Jack Billy says, "Morning, Baz. Keep reading online. Still no signings. Don't mind being patient. Just as long as they take time to get the right ones in, there will be a signing this. I think Celtic are going to roll out the two signings on Monday. I think they're going to roll out the whole Paulo Bernardo one and Kasper Schmeichel. Or they'll do what Celtic do. They'll put one out one day, and this is all the way to manipulate the press to make sure that we get the good headlines. One day they'll put out Kasper Schmeichel, next day they'll put out Paulo Bernardo, and then the day after that, hopefully they get the Adam either one done. Anyway, Lorna Lanky says, something tells me that Matt won't leave this transfer window. He'll go in January. Lanky, I think Matt O'Reilly wants that. For me, why Matt O'Reilly, if he's going to leave Celtic, he has to be going to another team in the Champions League. He's not going to leave and go to another team that isn't in the Champions League. Matt O'Reilly wants to prove himself at the highest level. Matt O'Reilly wants to stick two fingers up to the Denmark boss and say, look, right, here I am, and I've done it in the Champions League. I'm doing it in the Champions League. And bringing in Kasper Schmeichel is a clever, clever move. Clever move by Celtic, if you ask me. Why won't any Champions League games team? Celtic won't win any Champions League games with the current team. Not even close, says Michael. It's a done deal. I'm worried if it's not. It's a done deal. It wouldn't have went out last night if it wasn't a done deal. Academy players can't think they're bigger than any. Yep, but this is changing with the pathway. Better than any fascist. I don't know what Norm's going about there. The stinking lack of planning. Schmeichel is a good signing, but obviously behind the scenes, they're clueless on transfers, says my TV. Is it they're clueless on transfers? Or listen to what Brendan Rodgers said at the Queen's Park game after it. He said, look, we could have signed 9 players. He said, but I want to sign good players. He was asked about the goalkeeping situation, and he said, look, I want to sign a goalkeeper, but I want to sign a good goalkeeper. To me, that's Brendan Rodgers saying, right, it's okay getting in this £8 million goalkeeper, and he's got these big wages, but can he carry the team? Can he carry the team when they're up against it in European football? Can he help defend from the back and motivate these players? Whereas he knows what he gets for Schmeichel. That's all I'm saying. I think you're reading to the Danish link. Too deep, Baz Casper. Keaton O'Reilly issues. Punted as soon as the asking price is met. You never know. Another 3 players, and if we're lucky, Vindal wouldn't commit. He had to go back to his favourite place. Yes. Rogers said at the Q&A he doesn't rate any young Scottish talent. I would like Motherwell player Miller. Portugal Express says he'll get 6 games before January, and if he does so, he'll be roasted. Might be willing to sign for a team in the Champions League. Talking about Matt O'Reilly, Kasper, 1 year deal with review to a further year. Yep, Kasper Schmeichel deal. It is a 1 year deal with the option of another year if he wants to take that up. Anyway, other than that, no, we've been on the go for 40 minutes this morning. I'm going to wake the missus up. Celtic need to sign 2 keepers because Bain and Segrist have both shown that they really are not dependable. Why should we sign? Why should we sign keepers when we've got 2 potentially good goalkeepers in the youth system setup? Anyway, we've had over 1,427 views this morning. There are currently 373 people watching the live at this moment. An absolutely fantastic start to Saturday. Big Kasper Schmeichel in goals for Celtic. Happy days as far as I'm concerned. We do need another goalkeeper in. We need a bit more long term planning. But Brendan Rodgers does not want to put his European conquests on the line this year. He wants a goalkeeper that he knows, likes, and trusts. And I think he's got that with Kasper Schmeichel. And on that note, have an absolutely fantastic day, Celtic fans all around the world.